to always check the date because it's really easy to lose track right now, but May 16th, 2024. Hello, welcome. Can we get a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Denise Menino,
Here?
Taylor Mandalou is absent. Dory Larson,
Here.
Robin Sanger,
Here.
Carol Mickett.
Present.
Siobhan is absent, although I thought she would be attending, but we'll see. I received some email from her earlier this week. She might still be here. And Peggy Varvaris is absent. And we have a quorum.
So have you heard from any of the absent?
I haven't
Members.
heard from Taylor. I reached out to everybody to see where we're at. I heard Siobhan indicated that she was planning on being, and she knew that it was on Thursday, but I didn't hear back other than that. So
Perhaps she is running late, so. There were two sets of minutes. I don't know whether everybody has had a chance to look at them, and I know that not everybody was at the, one of the meetings, but do you have any amendments or corrections at all on the April 2024 minutes?
Nope. I move that we pass the April meeting minutes.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And did you have a chance to look at the Earth Day meeting?
Why can't
Minutes.
I pull this up?
You have to click on the packet, the agenda packet.
Oh, I see.
And that way you have access to everything. You can just scroll
Thank you.
through it.
I downloaded them, but
Yeah, and that was more or less formality.
Sure. So I'll move that we accept the Earth Day minutes.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and it's time for public comments, and we have a visitor. Do you have anything that you would like to share or express at this meeting?
I'm just here to observe.
Okay, well, welcome. We appreciate that you're here.
Do you want to say who you are?
Sure. I'm Dr. Bobby Edwards. I moved to the area in December, and I actually watched your guys' last meeting online YouTube. So it's very intriguing that you guys are getting more established in sustainability. My PhD is in environmental science from Florida A&M, so I'm just interested. That's why I showed up today.
Excellent. Well, it's very exciting to have somebody here. Thank you for coming. And I would hope that you desire to get engaged in what's going on here, because it sounds like you've got the desire and the passion. Thank you. So, I guess,
Can I say
oh yes,
something?
Robin.
Besides just generally welcoming you, I'm sure you're aware, or I hope you are, that you can apply to serve on this committee online through the clerk's office. And then when there's a vacancy, you can generally be put on as an alternate and then be moved up into a regular position. So if this is something that you would like to contribute to in an ongoing basis, love to have you sign up.
Currently, I live in Pasco County, so I didn't know how that
I don't think that works.
I just know
Well,
you guys are more
after you move here,
Yeah, after
then you
move
can
here.
do that.
So the first item on tonight's agenda is my report on the BOC presentation, and I prepared it and went to the meeting. I was really grateful to have a couple of the members present at this meeting where it presented. Prior to the presentation, there was a proclamation for Earth Day that was a wonderful symbol for the month that we were presenting the update to the BOC of our activities last month. And Also a proclamation to celebrate Arbor Day, and Shannon Brewer was there to accept that. And it's hard to be objective about how the presentation went. Welcome, we're happy you're here.
Should I sit over here or over there?
Right over here.
Hi, everybody.
Siobhan.
So you all were familiar with what was going to be presented in advance. So all that I can say is that I felt that it was well-received. I feel that everybody that is on the Board of Commissioners is exceptionally receptive. And it's really exciting that the comprehensive plan incorporates so much of the sustainability plan into the long-term vision of the community of Tarpon Springs, the city of Tarpon Springs. And now it's just a matter of connecting, making the connections. So I'm going to go right into the Earth Day event, which was the following night. We had an Earth Day celebration launch event where many got hard copies of the plan, and Tommy did a beautiful presentation. We had a meet and greet. Tommy, do you have any idea how many people were there for that?
Yes, I have that sign-in sheet. Let me go double check. It was probably in the 30s, I want to say.
Can we get one of those?
I think so.
Well, maybe not
Do
quite
we,
that
do
many.
we have any more additional hard copies of the the plan for other members?
I don't have any on me. Everyone took them all. So
Okay.
we can make some more if anyone would like some
I
additional
would.
copies.
I'd like a copy.
We had about 22, 23 attendees, so.
Okay, and I feel that we were able to get around and meet everybody. I mean, I would hope that that happens whenever we're out in the public and we're able to engage with people, because they have to know that they're welcome and that it's exciting that they're participating. I think it's a really necessary part of community that is part of sustainability under the social piece, but I'm sure that Robin knows a lot more about the need for social connection, and I think that that's the beginning of real community expression of sustainability, is when we are able to connect as human beings and value the area that we live in, value, whether it's a beach cleanup or whether it's participation in just a meeting that celebrates something that has been a long time coming, which was the plan that we've worked on for so long. But it's part of mental health to be with people that have similar excitement and passion. So I would love if you could say a few words about whatever your experience was too on the night of the presentation or on the Earth Day celebration.
Do you want to keep it separate? Like, do we want to have a conversation about the?
Yeah, first on the
BOC
BOC presentation, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I think you did a great job, Denise, like representing our committee. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thanks. I hope that I wasn't supposed to actually prepare any video or anything for this evening. I felt like it was just an informal affirmation of how the meeting went.
Yeah. No, and I think that in the comments that we received, there's definitely a recognition that sustainability is like a three-component piece, that it's like the social aspect, the environmental, and then also the economic piece, and that the community is putting that together because leadership is helping explain it at events like the presentation. So I thought I was inspired and hopeful about that.
Thank you.
I thought you did an excellent job, and I thought that the PowerPoint was terrific. I also was very happy about how the commissioners responded. And to piggyback on what Dory said, I think that the acknowledgement that it's just not environmental it was really important, because we tend to talk more about the environment than the other two pieces. And I think that it's becoming more and more aware that Tarpon really needs to look at the way the economic disparity in the city and the societal differences need to be all addressed for the sustainability of the community. And I'm glad that the commissioners recognize that, and that we can start focusing on that as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you. I appreciate the support. And I really appreciated the support of all of the commissioners and the mayor, and felt that we are on track to fulfill a long-term dream. And I hope we see the good fruit from all of it. So the next item on the agenda was the Earth Day event, and I kind of segued into that already because it was just following the meeting the night before, and it was another beautiful opportunity to bring people together, and it was casual. I felt it was very easy to relate to everybody that was there, and we had people that came even from Safety Harbor to kind of to participate and see what we're doing, which I think is awesome, because we did that a lot prior to developing the plan. We were connecting with a lot of the sustainability managers and coordinators in other areas, from Largo, West Palm Beach. We had conversations with a number of different people rather than reinventing the wheel. So they're looking at our community now, hoping to do the same thing in Safety Harbor, and we're there to participate. And I just wish we had people with as much enthusiasm as the two women that came from Safety Harbor all over the community, but it was a blessing that everyone that came seemed to be engaged in what we were doing.
So I'd like to say that I did not attend, and I didn't attend because of the sunshine law.
Oh, sure.
And I wasn't sure what I could do there and to whom I could speak, and I figured you were there, and you're such a good spokesperson for this, that you would be there and be with other people.
Dory and I both made rounds. I think we tried to consciously connect with everybody that came there and introduce ourselves and make them feel welcome.
Yeah, my takeaway was a big thank you to all the city staff that participated. So there were lots of different departments there represented. So Parks and Rec was there, and it was really nice for them to be part of it as well. And I did make sure that I walked around and spoke with everybody at the different tables to make sure that everyone felt welcome. And I thought it was really cool that it was like not just like one group of people from the city. There were like across several like age demographics, gender demographics, racial demographics. I mean, it was like really like a nice cross section of our community, people that actually showed up and took the time to want to learn more. So I was really inspired by that.
I would like to point out, when we went back and cross-referenced our sign-in sheet, the vast majority of people were new sign-ups to Connect Tarpon. So this is kind of like our first foray into doing a different style of like social media engagement. We're trying to focus on like the sponsored posts. So this was a little bit of a trial run for that, and I think it was. Yeah, we didn't have a huge turnout like that. There's a lot of things that go into that. I thought it was relatively successful, but we did have success in one thing, which is getting new people there who had not previously been involved. We had a lot of folks that I was speaking with that had no idea we had a plan, had no idea we had a committee. They got noticed, they saw it on social media, and they decided to show up. And so I think we were definitely successful in that respect in getting new people engaged.
So let's address this sunshine rule. So how did it work with having Dory and Denise there? Did you talk to
We
one
avoided
another?
each other like the plague.
You avoided each other.
I mean, we just didn't, yeah.
We just,
Okay.
we didn't engage in anything that would have been votable or,
Okay.
you know. It was very casual, it was informal, and for the most part, we were busy relating to people like bees to flowers out in the community, you know,
Okay.
so we weren't really
And how did
interacting
these
as much.
minutes get made?
That's good.
Oh, you did that.
He was there.
Well, of course he was there.
And your
Somebody has to write
presentation,
the
minutes. He's our guy.
your presentation was excellent.
Thank you.
I really appreciated that. The summary of what was happening in the community. And kudos to whoever did the Facebook post, because I was seeing it constantly prior to the Earth Day event. So that was,
Yeah, no, I would like to
Excellent.
acknowledge our recreation staff. They have a very positive social media engagement. You know, they get a lot of followers. They do a really good job having good continuous content. And so we kind of left it to them, like, it's a community event. They're used to driving and advertising community events. We said, let the experts be the experts. So some of the, it is interesting when you do the social media stuff, like, yeah, it's a little bit of, you have to cast a wide net. So we had thousands of like views and engagements that were unique when we got the reports back on the social media. So to generate the turnout that we did. So I thought that was pretty positive.
Indeed.
awesome. Okay, I think that we can move on to item 3, which is communication goals. And we have a list of a lot of different things that were contributed. I see what my own were, but I don't know. If anyone wants to share what their perspectives were on community and communication of the sustainability plan. Or sustainability in general, I mean, I think that this is the task now, is to make people aware.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Just procedurally, so tonight, we're just talking about like trying to narrow down on the topics that we want, but then not how we're gonna implement that?
I think that would be the best. We, in the last update that we did in April, you know, we kind of talked about how to communicate like different types of environmental initiatives or sustainability initiatives. And kind of the first step was to establish a goal, right? And we wanted everyone to submit some goals. And these are the, of the folks that submitted, I kind of compiled these. They're not really in any particular order other than the order they were emailed to me, although I did move a few that to the top that directly correspond with an action plan for this year in the sustainability plan. I thought that was like a nice thing to highlight. And what I would like to do is start winnowing down some high-level goals, like what do you want, what does the committee want out of the communication plan? And then we can take that back to our future sustainability coordinator relatively soon, hopefully, and have them design a plan around that goal, right? So again, if your goal is, you know, so define what the outcome we want is, and then they can define the target audience, yeah, and you can have input on like target audience, but I do kind of want to leave like the how to the future coordinator to let them, you know, tackle this challenge in their own way. But I definitely want to hear what's the outcome that you want that the committee wants out of this.
Can
So
you or Denise read
I
them
just- I want-
out?
I just wanted to follow up to
Oh,
my
yeah.
question, if you don't mind. Just to follow up, and the reason I'm asking it is because one of the things that I suggested was the home and business tour, like sustainability tour, but that's more of like an action or like a how to do it instead of like the goal of like what we want to educate on, or you know what I mean, like what we want to communicate. So that was, I mean, like I would.
It's still a good
I'm hoping
idea.
we can still do the one, even though, you know what I mean, even if it's not selected as like, because it's not really,
It's a one and done.
it's a
like
way to do it, not a,
Yeah, ongoing thing.
I-
Well,
I
it
not
might
a,
be an
not a
ongoing-
topic or like a goal.
Right.
So-
I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
Okay.
before we actually go through the list of submissions to this topic, why don't we just open up what our objectives are? I know how I feel about it, but I would love to hear, when we think about communication, a communication plan that connects us to the citizens of Tarpon Springs, what would the objective be?
Denise?
Yes.
So when I look at this list, several of them kind of work together. And I think there could be an overarching goal for example, the net zero canopy loss ties in closely with encouraging how to plant a tree and ensure it will grow, the encourage Florida native plants and Florida-friendly yard that's in our 2024 action item also goes along with pesticide use and use on the environment of how the algae blooms and all that. So it's like, to me, what I would be looking at is overall education of the public, especially we have so many new residents who have no clue about what's going on with where they're living now. I remember going to a client's house and she was shocked. She said, "There's so many lizards, I need to have an exterminator come out and kill them." It's like, and they just moved here from a northern state and had not a clue. So the other thing is, a resident spoke with me about using rat poisons, and with all of our raptors and so forth, eating the poisoned rats or mice or whatever and dying, which happens from time to time. We have the ospreys, we have the owl incident that happened in Safety Harbor where the whole family died.
Yep.
And she lives out on Seabreeze, and she said that it's hard for her to share this information. So a way for residents to share things that they're concerned with, but also that deal with an overarching themes. Florida-friendly lawn can go with water conservation. So I think a lot of these are kind of interwoven things.
Yes.
And the goals are not mutually exclusive. So if there's a way to weave those things in, and education of children. So obviously, the new residents, a lot of them, young families are moving here to where the children can have an awareness of our environment, an appreciation of our environment, and go from there. I think that it's admirable, the Merchants Association and Chamber of Commerce and businesses, but I think with public support, that the businesses will fall in line. In other words, with, certain restaurants that serve like on beach communities that use plastic and things that just go right into the waterways. It was public outcry that caused the plastic straw ban and the bag bans that are happening in coastal communities. So I think that engaging the community is our most important goal. And if we could find a way to just weave some big picture things together to where the different facets of those engage our community members.
Can I piggyback on that? Just because, so there's actually a campaign that's called like Be Floridian, Protect Our Fun, and it's the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, and they've got this whole program. It's like resources, a homeowner toolkit, Florida-friendly products, links we love, and it's like, if you've got time, how much time do you have? Do you have a morning, a day, the weekend, a rainy day? And there's a whole FAQ about.
What is the website?
So this is the Tampa Bay Estuary Program.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got whole segments like education, data visualization, it's already there. We just need to get it out. But I that's what I was thinking is how to be a good neighbor, or you know what I mean, how to be a good Tarponian, or welcome. This is your welcome packet.
Yes.
Lizards are cool.
Yeah.
A big lizard right
Ospreys
on
are
the front
cool.
desk.
We want to keep our birds.
We
That
like
would be
our
nice.
beaches, so don't try to reduce disposable plastic.
Oh, what-
At any rate,
That's
it's
great,
there.
Dory.
And what you shared, Robin, has been my experience with everybody that are moving into our neighborhood, very new, trying to jump on board, but not understanding the environment. You know, we have a snowbird that lives across the street from us and somebody who moved down here from New Jersey. So I think that that is right on, you know, and to have them be able to access a website like this. Do you think that the best way of reaching people would be through the utility bills? No?
I don't know. I mean, that's the go-to, but I'm not 100% convinced. I don't know. Do you? I don't ever look at, I mean, I don't
I don't
ever-
either.
You don't look at
I
any of
mean,
the
to-
add-ons?
I look
in
at
there?
my
Or
bill.
you can,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think maybe a way to get this out into the community and be more visible would be to partner with our business community. And like, because people are walking around town, they're going into their pizza place to pick up their dinner or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, if we can get some business partners that would help and be partners with this,
move this.
then I mean, to me, that's one way that we can help get it more visible in the community.
Well, even like Rusty Bellies is an obvious choice. It's on the water. It's a
Yeah.
very popular restaurant. It's always packed and a lot of, you know, it's a residents go-to.
Yep.
So something like that maybe, but,
Okay.
I will say, just to help kind of collect our thoughts here and maybe facilitate it, it does seem like there seems to be a little bit of a consensus around, maybe just to formalize this, educating the community on local environmental concerns, you know,
Yes.
or the natural environment, you know, and improving education. I think that's a really nice, like, compact goal. It can give us some, we talked about some methodologies there, and actually, if the committee wanted, like, you know, engaging with the local business community, that could be at a good goal too. I think that's a nice one.
What about a welcome wagon sort of approach? You know, I went to a meeting once in Palm Harbor for the welcome wagon, and they had a huge group, and, you know, I mean, could go talk to people,
new residents.
new
New
residents,
residents.
give them
That's a good
a
idea.
flyer or something.
Does Tarpon Springs have neighborhood associations?
Yes,
They do?
yes.
Well, that's a way to do it. I know in St. Pete, our neighborhood association was very active. Where I live in Tarpon, there is none.
Yeah, I don't have one either.
So
No.
when
But-
you're talking about that, do you mean an HOA?
No.
Okay.
A neighborhood
Just a
association.
neighborhood association. Yeah,
So
there's nothing
in
that
St.
way.
Pete, like I lived in Old Southeast, and we had a president. Yeah, I mean, there were officers. They had regular meetings. They did events. So it was a way of organizing the neighborhood. And so they would even go to city council meetings. You know, they were active as a group. And I mean, throughout the city, there were such active neighborhood associations, and they would do all sorts of things. It was amazing. And I mean, that could be a structure, and there was always a head of the neighborhood association. So each neighborhood had an association, and then they had a council of neighborhood, and that person would be represented at the city council, and that person eventually became on the city council person. But that was a way of representing the needs of the people, the neighborhoods, what each neighborhood needed, what the interests were, and developing that community within, you know, so neighbors knew each other. And it really was, it's robust. And that could be something that Tarpon could consider instead, because when you have a neighborhood association, you know, you're in this smaller group, and then people would come, the police would come, the fire people would come and report, and if there was an incident, they'd come and report to everybody. So we could think about that instead of trying to get an event. We could do both, but it's also a good way to communicate between in a bigger city to have smaller groups.
I think that's a great idea, but how, would the city be able to take the initiative to encourage neighborhoods to get together?
That's something I would really have to look into. I don't know if we have a history of like helping to facilitate
Yeah.
forming a neighborhood associations. I know a lot of our areas do have, existing HOAs, which we
Yeah,
do
but
tend to
that's
hear from
different.
periodically.
Maybe under the umbrella of public safety because, you know, of our hurricanes, our storm issues. And after a big storm, one of the best ways to recover is to get together with your neighbors.
Absolutely.
So, maybe strategically, it starts at a higher level, and then we grab onto that.
We can also contact St. Pete and see how their structure works, because it's really been a long history of it.
So, in our plan, we have like inventory of civic organizations, neighborhood associations, and local service providers as like one of the action items. It's like not until 2027, 2030. So like we do have that in our plan, and we'll get there. And I mean, I understand that like it would help create connectivity if we had it now, but like I think we need to also like stay focused on what we're,
What
you know
we're
what I mean,
doing
like
now.
the near term for now, and know that like that's part of the plan is to get there. I mean, I also think we're a little bit different than St. Pete, and that St. Pete's got so many people that it has those you know what I mean? Like there's enough density to have those kind of things happening.
I think that in St. Pete, was organic because there's neighborhoods.
Right.
Old Northeast,
Yeah.
Kenwood. I mean, there are all these neighborhoods. So St. Pete's made up of neighborhoods.
Yep.
And Tarpon, I mean, I think that I have a neighborhood. We all know each other, and so it's informal.
Yeah, no, I would love it, and I mean, I think that it creates that community, but I don't know that like if city resources to like build that infrastructure right now is like on the table. Like,
So can I just ask for thoughts on, initially, we were talking about just the communication plan outcome or objectives. I mean, I guess if we can at least identify the objectives, we'd have a better idea of how to approach it with the details of actions.
well, and that's why I was asking, like, are we coming up with the ideas, or are we coming up with the implementation strategy? And it sounds like we're not coming up with the implementation strategy, so we probably shouldn't be like thinking through that tonight and
But we
leaving
just need
that,
the ideas
right?
first.
Yeah, so like, I
Right.
think our time would be better spent just focusing on what is the main ideas.
Yeah, I see. We seem to be coalescing. I mean, and this is around, educate the community on local environmental concerns. My goal tonight was to really help facilitate. Maybe we can get to like our top 3 things that we would like the outcomes to be, right? And if the outcomes were educate the local community about environmental concerns, that's a very nice goal. Like that's clearly, it's well defined. It gives us an ability to address that with like our existing staff and maybe through existing events and things like that, and just target our messaging. Engaging with the local business community is what we kind of talked about a little bit. Other themes that we had talked about in the past were youth education and trying to engage the youth more. That's a laudable goal. And then there's other sort of like, and the other kind of 3 more nuts and bolts goals that we've kind of kicked around a little bit, have talked about. Water conservation has been something that's come up in the committee a few times. That's very topical right now. I kind of threw that in as a staff suggestion because we're going to be focusing on that for a little while. Recycling rates would be another simple one, like, or I've lost it. But yeah, if we wanted maybe pick like, like Florida friendly and like outdoor landscape care and things like that, like best practices for sustainable outdoor spaces, for residences. So maybe of those 5, educate the community on local environmental concerns, engage the business community, water conservation, educate the youth, and sustainable, landscape. Maybe we could winnow that down to 3 that we could focus on.
So we're still focusing on the environment.
Sure.
So this one thing, I mean, community connectivity, I think is really important. And we know that in our whole country that this is a big issue. Like, how do we connect with each other? That's why neighborhood associations are important, but it's also difficult to do. How do you have community
Build
connectivity? You know, learning, I mean, I have to say, the things I put in are easy to do, how to compost, how to plant a tree. I mean, those are real doable, right? And people understand what that means and they can come. But the whole amorphous idea of how to connect, I mean, that's what Peace for Tarpon's all about, and you know how difficult
Right.
that is. But, I mean, maybe we partner with Peace for Tarpon. I mean, but to me, and going to Peace for Tarpon meetings, that's so important. And that's what really creates a robust community and a sustainable community, is if we learn how to communicate and live with one another
Bring
and
people
cross boundaries that seem to be rigid, and how do we make them softer? So, and people feel welcome. I think that word welcome is so important. How do we make people feel welcome to be here, to be part of, you know, the leadership in this community? That, to me, is a fundamental component of sustainability. But it's hard.
I mean, that is a laudable goal. That is a concrete thing that if we wanted to make that maybe like our third priority, we can look into what that would look like. I'll be honest, I'm probably the wrong person to answer that question. You know, you don't want the engineer being the one who's pushing your sense of community, you know, but creating a sense of community or improving the sense of community or a sense of place, it is a difficult challenge. I mean, I do feel, and I feel like most folks that live in Tarpon or that are longtime residents have a strong sense of community. You can see that when we do like public engagement events and like Snow Place like Tarpon. And I do feel like a lot of folks really identify with where they live here. But that's something that maybe we could look into. Maybe that's a concept we could explore. It's a little less direct than and maybe measurable, but maybe we start down that road and explore what that looks like.
Yeah, I would say that creating something that is, whether it's a communication newsletter, and I think that you had a note that you were going to say something about that, the status of a newsletter for May or June.
We've got newsletters in draft right now. They're getting ready to come out.
So what are we going to do with those? Or, I mean, how are they going to be posted? How are they going to be shared? What's going to happen with the newsletter?
We're going to share those the same way we did previously, you know, send them out through the Connect Tarpon group. We'll probably do a little bit extra on this one just because we haven't done it in a while, and we're kind of trying to try new things with the community engagement. So we might put them out on social media again, try and do some sponsorship, try and drive more folks to generate more followers. It's a kind of newer kind of content. So, you know, and obviously get it up on the city website, you know. But that's initially what we're thinking is, you know, substantially what we did to publish the last couple of newsletters before we had a little bit of we did miss a newsletter last year. So,
Because I think in order to start building something, you have to have predictable intervals of connection.
sure.
You know, somehow. And I totally agree with what Carol is saying, you know, about that being the building, the foundation. And the other thing about new residents, I think it's going to be very important to get information out somehow to introduce people to what it means to live in Florida. I think that yeah, that is a huge component.
Could we maybe redefine this a little bit? Is maybe the better goal instead of building a sense of, because again, I really do feel like the folks that are like longtime residents, that people will tell you if they're a Tarponite, you know. Maybe the goal is integrating new residents into our sense of community. Is that something more what we're trying to target?
I think I would agree. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that there are different communities in Tarpon, and I think some identify as Tarponites in certain ways. And the issue is, how do we unite the different communities? So, for example, there's a strong Greek community. Well, how do we integrate the Greek community more with, let's say, the Black community, which at one point were very interconnected because they both were sponge people. And then slowly it's, so how do we integrate that? And how do we integrate non-Greek people, So we do have disparate identities in Tarpon. And the idea is we're all here together, and how do we make that as robust as possible? Because the more connections we have, the better we all are.
So to me, like what I'm hearing is that theme of like being a good neighbor in Tarpon to one another, right?
I like that.
To one another, and then also it could also be to the environment. So it could be like this whole messaging around like being a good neighbor. And it could incorporate lots of social, like we got the email about the senior citizen initiative. I mean, so like there's ways that like the city's doing things, just like kind of pulling it together under an umbrella.
Yeah, no, I think it is important to acknowledge a lot of the stuff that we already have. I mean, like, we do have a lot of really nice community programming. Maybe for some people, living in Tarpon and being a Tarpon resident is about going to First Fridays and seeing your neighbors there, or going to the shows for the Performing Arts Center, or for some folks, it's playing on the same Little League teams. We do have a lot of different community engagement, like events and activities and things like that that do a lot of these things. I don't think we lack for like programming, but if the goal is to maybe utilize some of the existing things to help build a little bit stronger sense of community, that might be something interesting that we could
So
work
how
towards.
can we piggyback on things that already exist and be participating somehow without breaking sunshine laws?
One thing that we could do.
One person going to everything.
If we decide on a consistent message of what we want to say, whether it's being a good neighbor, or we need to be connected, or a connected community is a strong community, and you hear those slogans everywhere, that they're, what are we going to call our community? Sarasota Strong, or Orlando Strong, or whatever. It's that sense of unity, but how to create that, because it has to be authentic, and it takes time, and it's small work. You can't have an event in, a stadium event and to connect people. It's intimate work and it's small group work. So if there was, though, a consistent piece of marketing material to where if there's a Little League gathering, or there's a senior gathering, or there's a community engagement gathering, or whatever, something that speaks to that a little bit. It doesn't have to be like, it has to be done all at once with one fell swoop. It takes time, and it's sequential to build on that. So if we had something to kind of introduce people to the idea of Tarpon Springs, and just claim it. Tarpon Springs is a connected community. We care for each other. We care for our environment. And then just a few little points of what that might mean, or something low-key, not where someone has to read a book about it or read a flyer about it. Just something to even put in people's minds. And Denise, you know how important that is to kind of get the consciousness where you want it to be, to start going in that direction. So,
Well, Dunedin did that, and their umbrella is home of Honeymoon Island. That's what they agreed on.
home of Honeymoon Island in Dunedin?
And which sort of pissed off the downtown merchants. Because they got left
And
behind
so it
on that.
begins.
But they did they put it out to the community, and they voted on it, and that's what they came up with.
And I think too, that's a little bit more of like a tourism, like marketing kind of tagline, you know, to try and drive folks to visitors and things like that. And I think we're doing really well with that. I mean, you know, we have a very well-defined like tourism marketing program that Karen Lemon's, you know, is largely in charge of. And, you know, we've got, everyone knows that Tarpon's a great day trip, you know, so, but this is a little different. So it's about how you stitch together all these different groups of folks. That's an interesting question. I think that's enough for like staff to kind of grapple with for a little while.
Right.
Well, I just want to respond
luck, Tommy.
to one thing, is it sparked with something you said, but I've been here, that everybody knows this. Well, I'm telling you, everybody doesn't know this. I mean, I don't know this.
Know what?
And, well, like you said, something about Tarpon day trip or something like that. I don't know what.
He said it was a great day trip.
Oh,
Yeah.
a great day trip.
People come here to go to the docks or go to the beach or, you know.
Yeah. See, I don't know those things. I guess that when I lived in St. Pete, I did go to the docks, but that was it. I didn't know there was the rest of Tarpon until I moved here. Like, I didn't even know there were bayous. I just knew there were sponge docks. I was in Sarasota the last week doing a project, and I said, oh, I live in Tarpon. They go, oh, yeah, the tourist town.
Tourists.
I was like, what? You know, but I think that is something that we should never assume that people know things.
Sure.
Because we don't. I mean, and that's, you know, the more we can communicate. And I love what Robin says, because these small, intimate things, and I'd say that one of the most wonderful experiences about knowing more parts of Tarpon is because of positivity. The Peace for Tarpon thing that we do every Wednesday, once a month, where this group of people that I would never meet, and they would never, you know, come together, and for an hour, we talk about virtues. And it is the most wonderful thing. And the connections, it's those connections through that keep me going. Not so much the topic, but the people. And those intimate things, somehow, I know they're hard to create, but it's that sense of community. And I feel like these people, I never really see in person, occasionally, because we do it on Zoom. I mean, it's just invaluable.
Well, I'm a former advertising executive, creative executive. Now I'm a landscape designer, so I merge those two things together. One of our greatest strengths here, and maybe one way of connecting to the populace, is the love of the water. And also I've read that we have more waterfront than any other community in Pinellas County. We'd have to look that up, but I think you can really get people's attention when you talk about water, the quality of the water, you know, and then you can also, the next conversation is the flooding. Everybody's got to be concerned about the flooding also. So if we get there, you know, you have to have a bridge. You have to have a way to connect with people. So maybe through the water. I mean, we have all these bayous. We have the sponge industry. We have the Gulf. You know, beaches. I mean, we have so many assets in that direction. And
Yes, we
also
do.
historically, water has been so important to us also. I come from Buffalo, New York, which is on Lake Erie, and water is so important there also. So, and in my
Snow
childhood,
is water.
well, yes, snow is water too.
Eventually.
But Buffalo, I'm only bringing this up because Buffalo has gone through a renaissance, believe it or not. And when I was a child, detergents were causing all kinds of harm because of the phosphates in the detergents. So the lake, which was formerly a most clear, beautiful thing, was just toxified with algae blooms. And so when that was turned around, and there were more progressive people with a vision, because it was formerly a very industrial place. Now the waterfront has bike paths, and they have these exhibits, outdoor exhibits about the history of Buffalo, so everybody can become really, proud of that. So, there's some ways of looking at some other places and how they turned water into a positive. Now, St. Pete has the biggest
Park
parkland,
system,
waterfront
yeah.
parkland. And they've really turned that into an opportunity. But this might be a vehicle about how to engage with our citizens.
I like that.
Thank you so much for brainstorming this, because I think that we needed to just kind of express what our objective was. And, from my perspective, the objective is to get people to understand what sustainability means. But I think that sustainability, and a big part of that is community connections.
Right.
When we first moved here, that's why I started a blog, just to reach out, to try to get some people inspired. And, then we started regularly having a Monday night vegan potluck at our house. And our house isn't huge, but it got to the point where we were having 40 people on Mondays. And that's a lot of people on a Monday night that were coming out. It was mainly that we were sharing, ideas on gardening, and, most of the people that were attracted to coming were coming because of, we actually had a little community that we called Growing Together, because we were learning, about growing here in Florida, and we had no exposure to that until we moved here, obviously. We looked at our backyard, it was just a sandbox, and
Yeah.
we thought, how do you do this, and that's why we reached out to people like Jim Kovaleski and a lot of other market gardeners in the area, and we started inviting them. But I don't know if the blog did any good at all, but it was, I was getting responses from it, and that was a positive thing. And it was something that at least was predictable. I was trying to do them on a weekly basis. And we
Sounds
did it
like
for about
something
18 months.
we could, I'd go to that.
Yeah, I think that it would be, that's just another idea, hosting an event like that on a regular, monthly basis, maybe. But,
Well,
sorry.
I was gonna change topics but you wanted to keep going with that, so.
well, one thing in terms of an event, we can make a toolbox, how you would do something at your own house, right? How you do this, little invitations, how you do that, a list of speakers that might come. So how to do it individually. And then that can build community through, you have little ones and then you have big ones. So I think that's just wonderful.
It worked.
And I love that tagline, Growing Together. That's a really, really good name. That's solid.
I like that.
It's
Yeah.
not being used anymore, so we can use it.
Grab it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Um,
just to clarify here, so I'm
Yes.
hearing two main goals. I'm hearing educate the community on local environmental issues and some iteration of build a stronger sense of community.
Yes.
Can I add a third?
Yeah.
Sure.
That's why I wanted to jump in, because I just wanted to make sure it wasn't totally missed. So one of my things that I wanted to encourage is a greenhouse gas reduction target and why it's important, but tying it to the economic piece too, that we added a whole lot of insulation to our house. Our power bills went down $50 a month. So over a couple of years, it'll pay for itself. But there's also now tax credits to help people pay for that. So to me, people understanding like ways to save money on their bills,
Great.
and not just homeowners, but like businesses too, like, and that there's funding to make that happen.
Save
that-
sustainably.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Save sustainably. That's awesome. Okay.
So in terms of that, I just have a question, and maybe you can answer this, Tommy, or our commissioner. So our governor and the legislature have put out a bill that was signed about not doing things connected with climate change and not having like wind in the waters and increasing uses of natural gas and less green, like getting rid of green things. It was in the paper today. It's just been signed and
I saw-
introduced.
Yeah.
So my question is, and this has been an issue, is the state level has, stopped local people from, local municipalities from doing certain things
Sure.
because it,
Tree, like the tree ordinance.
tree ordinance, things about guns, all sorts of stuff. You know, the state sets the tone or the rules. And I'm just wondering how that new bill impacts municipalities.
So I can speak to this in general. This phenomenon you're talking about is called preemption.
It just was signed, right?
I haven't read the bill, so I'd have to go back and look at that. So in the state of Florida, all local governments, obviously if we go really big, we have the Constitution, right? We have the federal government has its roles and responsibilities clearly delineated by the Constitution, and the states have reserved rights, and all. In general, all local and county governments derive their ability to govern from the power of the state.
Correct.
And so the state can dictate what the local governments can regulate or not because they don't have any, de facto power under themselves. They're generally allowed for to regulate things. Some things are specifically, this is a statute that they have to do, like comprehensive planning is required to be done by the counties, for example, or in cities. But they also have the ability to regulate what we can and what we cannot do, such as developing one that came up. One of the first big preemption ones a few years ago was like minimum wage. There was a desire that they did want a patchwork of minimum wages across the state, and so cities and counties can't set minimum wage standards. It's reserved to the state now, to the state of Florida now. So, in general, if we have a preemption bill that comes in and it directs us no longer to do something, we have to comply. With regard to this bill about that was recently signed, I'd have to go back and review it and report back. If you'd like, I could take a look at it and make that a future action item.
There were things like you can't be required, I guess there was a law that had been passed that said if you're going to purchase things, you should purchase things that were green issues, but now that's been thrown out. And so I'm just, I'm curious when these things happen, given what this committee dreams about, how this impacts our dreams, maybe not our dreams, but the implementation of our dreams.
Well, that's to me why community connection is so important because personal choices can't be subverted or interfered with.
And that's why I was hoping to have that piece about greenhouse gas reduction, like maybe not even wording it that way, but just educating people on ways that they can lower their costs. And then, no matter what the state of Florida is doing, if people want to put, like we did, the water heater that we have, that's really,
Like
really,
we have.
right?
Because of you.
But that's
Right.
It's those kind of like personal choices. Like I would rather put an energy efficient appliance in my home and not pay money for extra electrons that I don't need. Like to me, that just makes sense as a homeowner with making financial decisions that are better. And if there's tax credits to help offset the higher upfront cost, and then you're recouping that very quickly, and then it's just money in your pocket. Like our power bill last month was $55 because we have solar panels.
Oh, right.
So, you,
Right.
and so I think educating people that there's like funds to help do that is
And
to me an important, like, one of the goals that we should be
did you
working
get
towards.
your insulations through recommendations from Duke Energy?
Yeah. Yeah, so we got like some kind of energy rebate from Duke, and then there's also the federal rebates, so like you combine it and then,
But did Duke come and inspect your house and
Yep.
they give you a list of where you can go?
yep.
Okay.
I really like this one, actually. This is like right in our wheelhouse for staff. I mean, it's very similar to other programs we already run, like about like water conservation and things like that. So, and it's very topical right now also with the availability of federal funds. I think this would be, it's also, I have a little bit stronger level of comfort with this one because it's a little bit easy. It's like, all right, increase awareness about specific programs. That's something that's like relatively easy to tackle, building compared to, stitching together members of the community, increase awareness. It's measurable also.
Well, and it's that economic piece too that I think is really
Yeah.
important, that like,
And the newsletter's a good vehicle to get that info out.
It sure is.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's the most important part, is the vehicle, because we've got great topics to share to get people more connected and more on board with sustainability and saving while they do it. That's awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate all of the great ideas. Commissioner? You are adjourning? Pardon me?
No.
No, we're not adjourning. Did you have a comment on this section? We would love to have a comment.
John Koulianis, 1020 Peninsula Avenue. Carol, we just have to roll with it. The state may, they're going to change rules and regulations, and we just have to learn to flow along through it. And still, I think about, I think about living longer, living healthier, and living better. I introduced something that I've talked to Robbins quite a few times. I've actually talked to Tommy about it. He probably doesn't remember. And Carol, you were there when I did my little song and dance at the Peace for Tarpon meeting. I want to be put on the agenda maybe in the next meeting. I'd like to introduce something to you that I think will go hand in hand with what we're doing here in your sustainability committee. I think that, we need to find a common theme, right, in the city. And I think that's oftentimes what we can coalesce around, something that we can all agree upon. And, again, living better, living longer, living healthier, those things all of us can agree upon, no matter what community we live in. So hopefully you will indulge me and allow me to be on your agenda. And for example, I proposed at the Charter Revision Committee. We have unanimity in town, I think near unanimity. I couldn't say that word when I was proposing, talking to you. You remember, yeah. But that, we don't want we don't want too much density, right? We don't want high buildings in Tarpon. So I proposed a charter amendment, and I hope they take it. And the reason I'm telling you guys about it, because you can put pressure on them, that no building will be built in Tarpon Springs over 5 stories without going to public referendum. That not public input, but public decision. I'm not sure it shouldn't be 4 stories, but we need to come up with, again, sustaining our town. So when we talk about sustainability, it's sustaining a life, quality of life as well. So I hope, we can do those big things that make structural differences that protect our town into the future. And then we can also then start focusing on the stuff that can make our lives better now. So I'm going to be coming back to talk to you. And I'm actually going to hopefully be bringing somebody from Advent Health as well, because we're going to try to partner up.
Sounds good.
All right? So I'll
Thank
just
you.
leave you
Great.
with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, we're moving right along.
Move to the next agenda
Vulnerability assessment.
Okay.
Item number 4, and thank you so much for the wonderful inspired brainstorm. You said living longer, living healthier, what was the third piece?
Living better, I think.
Yeah, okay. All right, so thank you again. We've got a quick presentation on the vulnerability assessment and action plan. Just a little update. We're kind of at about 95% complete. This is largely a stormwater and flooding study, so a lot of the work that's been done has been very technical in nature, and we're kind of bringing this thing in for a landing. So it's time to bring it back and show you guys some results. So a little bit of background on this for folks that might not have, it's been a while since we've talked about it, and we've got some new members. So back in 2021, the state of Florida started the Resilient Florida program. This is really a statewide program that addresses coastal resiliency. It provides statewide guidance and standards for how to conduct vulnerability assessments, a statewide kind of database and inventory where they can compile all these things and make a, like sort of a statewide action plan that's combined with all these different local initiatives. And there's funding too, which is really great. And it's all about coastal resiliency. So back in 2022, we received an initial grant from Resilient Florida to conduct a vulnerability and assessment and action plan. We were eventually awarded additional funding to expand the scope of this study, and this came to about $191,000. I almost said million. $191,000 in Resilient Florida funding for the city to do the study, which is really great. We would have it would have been a little bit of a big lift financially to do this without the state support, which is good. We've been working with WSP, which is one of our environmental engineering consulting firms, to do this study. It's very technical in nature. And so we used that procurement method to start down the road on this project. And as I said before, right now the study is really being finalized, and we're working on our final grant reimbursement. So we're very much in the mix with DEP as far as just submitting different data sets and things like that, and getting all the money ironed out so that we get fully reimbursed, and then we'll be coming back to finalize the last details of the report. One really important note, and I think this is really key for the city, is that completing a vulnerability assessment is going to be required for us to apply for future Resilient Florida grant applications beginning this year. So starting in July 1st, there'll be, I believe that's when they're going to start opening up for the next phase of Resilient Florida dollars. And so to get implementation or construction money, you will have needed to completed one of these studies. So this really unlocks our ability to start applying for like the higher dollar items in the future.
And how many cities in Florida have done it? I mean, are we in a minority, or most people have done this study?
That's an excellent question. I couldn't tell you a number off the top of my head. It's not uncommon. A lot of the communities nearby us have already done it. Pinellas County's done a countywide one. Oldsmar completed theirs relatively recently. St. Pete's completed one. So we're in good company. A lot of folks, especially now that it's tied to the funding carrot, are very rapidly working to get caught up on this. And in some cases too, they're also not necessarily adopted by the local cities, but it's more of a countywide initiative, and especially more rural areas. So again, what's the purpose of this study? The purpose is to identify and prioritize our assets in areas that are at risk of flooding. it says through 2070. That's the nominal goal for the overall Resilient Florida program. We actually extended our planning horizon out to 2100. We also want to identify different strategies that the city can implement to address flood risk for our prioritized assets and areas, and also look at like sort of the next steps phase, identifying funding opportunities, what sort of additional work would need to be done, how do you start down the road to implementation. It's not a complete guide path like a master plan or anything like that, but it's an action plan. It's what do we do next? How do we go further down this road to make our community more resilient? There it is. All right, so conducting the study. This is really a multi-step process. It starts with looking at sea level rise. It then proceeded into a flooding analysis. With the flooding analysis, we conducted a risk assessment. We overlaid our flood coverage with different community assets to see what might be at risk under different scenarios. And then the next step is to develop plans and strategies to improve resiliency. So you can see once you get in the nuts and bolts of it, it's, we also want to look at consequences. So what are the relative risks associated with flooding impacts to different facilities? So for example, flooding at a coastal park that's dominated by mangroves, yes, it might be at risk, but maybe that's kind of okay. It's a resilient asset. If the water plant floods, that's a really different dynamic. So assessing relative level of risk and impact to these different assets was important. You can see here we've got a little infographic on the effects of sea level rise on storm surge. That sort of top bar you can see shows like what might be like a typical storm surge under a current scenario. The wind blows the water in, it impacts this structure. But as you see the sea level rise start to come up, it facilitates the ability for storm surge from this exact same storm to proceed further inland and cause additional damage as you proceed further inland under future sea level rise scenarios. One kind of interesting thing that we did find is we had to look at the sea level rise projections from NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. These are projections from the 2017 baseline. This is prescribed which scenarios you look at by the state methodology that's been adopted. They want everyone to kind of have a common frame of reference. They don't want one community to adopt a lower risk assessment than another, and and all of a sudden one town looks like it's doom and gloom and the town next door looks like it's all great because they use different projections. So they prescribed which projections we're supposed to look at, and we looked at the NOAA intermediate high and the intermediate low sea level rise projections, which range, if you go out to 2100, the intermediate low scenario was about 1.6 feet of sea level rise. Going out to, on the intermediate high was, much more serious, 5.9 feet of sea level rise, which is quite a bit different. And you can see there's also intermediate 2040 and 2070 time steps about what these scenarios might look like. Okay, so how did we conduct this study? Again, step one was we conducted some public workshops. You guys might recall Robin reporting on that in the past to try and engage community feedback and assess what the community's priorities were. Then we had to look at those sea level rise projections and develop a flooding model for the city. This was a pretty big lift. You can see in that top right, those are all the different areas that we did not yet have stormwater models for. So there's also, in addition to assessing our sea level rise risk, we also developed some really new stormwater modeling tools. So we've got the entire city covered with stormwater models now, so that we can use that for future like infrastructure assessments and things like that. So having existing stormwater models for the whole city is like a really nice side benefit of this as a tool for stormwater management moving forward. And then we also collected data on critical infrastructure. So we looked at a lot of different asset types. This is also, again, regulated by the state for consistency purposes. They want to see the same types of assets evaluated in all the statewide studies. So we looked at simple things like city buildings, city facilities, water and wastewater, pipes. We want to look at manholes, see if they're going to be inundated, roadway, water and wastewater facilities, schools. We also, unique to us, we looked at parcels in the Greektown area as a unique cultural heritage site, and a lot of other community assets as well. Yes.
So why are there
some areas that are highlighted and others that aren't?
Those are the areas where we had to do new models. The previous areas had been part of previous stormwater modeling exercises, so we didn't need to develop new models there.
Okay.
All right, so on to the results. So we broke the analysis into sort of two scenarios, well, not scenarios, but two sorts of frames of reference, right? So we wanted to look and isolate the effects of sea level rise and tidal, like periodic tidal flooding, the sort of sunny day, events like we see at the sponge docks right now. And then the other sort of suite of results that we looked at were about storm surge and combined flooding from a storm, because you kind of manage them a little bit differently. And there's really different levels of risk associated with those. Like, obviously we know that, nuisance flooding around the sponge docks or certain streets in town, there's an economic cost of that. It's not great. There's some property damage. And it's the rate that what the engineers would call the return interval is frequent. These occur frequently. They're high probability events. And storm surge, we were looking at a 100-year storm, which is sort of a much lower probability event. It's much less likely to happen in any particular year, but obviously the consequences are much higher. So they require different management strategies. And you can see here the yellow areas identify areas that might be inundated by tidal flooding on a periodic basis by 2040. Interesting to note, a lot of these are coastal wetlands, like mangrove swamps and things like that. So this might represent something more like higher depths of inundation in wetland communities. A lot of these areas do get inundated currently under certain very high tide events, they're or certain types of weather events. And they're a little bit resilient to that. But you can start to see by like the 2070 timeframe, there's much more significant impacts to like local roadways and things of that nature from tidal flooding on a more frequent basis. And the 2100 scenario, it's quite a bit more extensive. We also looked at our different assets about what might be impacted under different scenarios and when. So you can see Tarpon Springs High School was flagged as a potential, as having some risk. I believe that was out in the 2100 scenario, so we've got a little bit of time to address that. Other assets like, the sponge docks were obviously identified right away as areas that are currently being impacted. And the wastewater treatment facility also was something that we might be having to look at long-term about its siting.
In this map,
Sure.
is all of this Tarpon or is some unincorporated or?
I believe it does venture out a little bit into unincorporated Tarpon, or unincorporated areas in north of the county, north into Pasco County.
And how about to the east? Is that all Tarpon proper?
I'd have to go back and look at it. I don't recall if we clipped this boundary or not.
That looks about right. Our neighborhood's the last one on the right,
Yeah.
and we're the last incorporated neighborhood
Okay.
out there.
So you don't have flooding at all then?
We were just rezoned. We were a non-evacuation zone until last year. Now we're E.
I would point out WSP also did the flooding analysis for the Pinellas County vulnerability assessment, so we were able to lean on some of that work as well to fill in the gaps. So you can see obviously south of Klosterman is outside the city limits, so there's still results there, but it had to be modeled because some of those watersheds cross over into our city.
I see.
This is the combined flooding results. This is very much a good news, bad news scenario. So the bad news is if we get hit by a major 100-year storm, we're likely to experience a very significant storm surge. The good news is the sea level rise isn't likely to dramatically change that. You can see the areas that would be impacted under a very serious storm surge now versus 100 years in the future are roughly the same. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's the glass half full version of this map. Is that our risk to catastrophic storm surge is not likely to dramatically increase in the future. So, but we are a vulnerable coastal community, and there's kind of no way around that. We're in a tidally influenced area, and we're in a river delta effectively.
And the climate is unpredictable.
Now, that's certainly true.
This
Yeah.
point.
This is one where we really were looking a lot at critical assets. We're starting to delve into like emergency management issues here, and like looking at like community resiliency. A lot of resiliency, there's kind of two ways to look at resiliency. There's what can you do to prevent damage, and knowing that you're fairly unlikely to be able to prevent all the damage, how can you bounce back quicker after the storm? So being able to relocate things, elevating assets above target flood elevations, critical spares and things like that. Those all go into, all right, if we were to have knock on wood, like a Hurricane Ian or an Irma, what would get the city back up and running the fastest?
What's the elevation of the osmosis facility?
I don't recall offhand. I'd have to get back to you on that one. I want to say it's in like the low double digits, like 12, 13, 14, something like that. It probably varies across the site. One really common question we always get is, what's a 100-year storm? It's a synthesized storm. It's probabilistic, based on it's a storm that's statistically has a 1% chance of occurring every year. And we always like to, I threw this on here. This is the CAT comparison of our 100-year storm analysis versus the Category 2 hurricane storm surge model from the National Hurricane Center. You can see they're roughly comparable. So what I like to tell folks is, this model that we've done, it also gives you a little bit of an idea of like relative risk of, we've got a roughly 1% chance each year of having a direct hit from a Cat 2. Is roughly what this is kind of equivalent to. So obviously, in any particular year, relatively low risk. We haven't had a major direct hit from a hurricane in quite some time, going back to, I want to say, the 20s.
Knockwood. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. The guys with the microphones are going to be quite upset with me. But you can see it's roughly equivalent, So this is, our Category 2 hurricane storm surge map from the National Hurricane Center. So that's roughly what this represents in layman's terms. It's not exactly the same when you look into how it was made, but that's kind of comparable. We did look at, inventorying all these different assets that might be impacted, and we looked at these different categories of assets. So you can see here, the top table is for tidal flooding only. So what are we likely to have to address to like assets that could be impacted by tidal flooding by 2040 under certain scenarios? And we're looking at like stormwater outfalls, so again, that's something maybe relatively easy to address, check valves and things like that to prevent flooding back up through the stormwater system. You can see even in the intermediate low scenario, 350 feet of roadway additional beyond what we're experiencing now. And that's kind of a manageable challenge, I think. In the high scenario, that's over a mile of roadway. That's quite a bit. Historic buildings, some of those are most likely in the Sponge Docks area, and they tend to be, in the low-lying coastal areas. Parks, again, a lot of that park acreage, I do want to point out, is like mangrove wetland and things like that, area that's already coastally oriented anyway. And then you can see here the table below is sort of, that's your 1 in 100 year storm surge, direct hit from a hurricane. What are we looking at? We have a lot of facilities that are at risk. Looking back at those maps, we did kind of break this down into planning action areas. So we thought this would be a useful tool to try and prioritize different areas because they might require different management strategies. So for example, we broke this into like all of the watersheds that are sort of facing St. Joseph Sound. Those are the areas that would be more vulnerable to, say, we do tend to have a lot of existing wetlands there. We have a lot of natural coastline, but potentially more vulnerable to like a storm surge because you have the direct wave and wind action up against the coast. We did call out the Greektown historic area because it's kind of a unique area of cultural heritage, and we assessed that separately. The Anclote River area is sort of everything from the Alt 19 bridge that's in those coastal basins that tends to be a little bit more low-lying, a little bit more vulnerability to tidal flooding, and has lots of canals and things like that, can help propagate tidal flooding further up into the community. And we called out another, like a river wetland area, this is area where, like, one strategy that might be pursuable here would be to focus on preserving natural areas and trying to use your existing areas with lots of tidal wetlands and mangroves and seagrass beds and things like that as natural buffers to reduce the impacts. And then Lake Tarpon is its own watershed. It's kind of unique because it would be impacted by a totally different storm condition. We would have to have a storm that would most likely be going up through Tampa Bay would be what would cause major flooding in that area. So that's a little bit unique and actually a little bit lower risk because that's a managed lake. It has a large control structure owned by the Water Management District. So it's an operable lake. It's, they can lower the water levels in advance of storms and things like that. And they have ways to mitigate risk there. So it's a little bit different condition than some of the other watersheds. All right, so going further into good news, how do we address these challenges? I know people see flooding maps, they don't like them. I don't like them either. They're very interesting, but it's usually not good news. No one wants to find out that you got a 1% chance of having 5 feet of water in your front yard. But the good news is it's relatively low risk in any particular year. So we looked at a variety of different strategies for how we can address this. So we started off with a whole planning component. What do we do? So you might see some stuff here that comes right out of the sustainability plan. You can see the second one from the bottom in planning is establish a city seawall elevation policy. Broward County was called out as an example that's already established this, and the goal would be to try and incorporate sea level rise projections into our seawall ordinance, something very nuts and bolts. If you know that you're going to have higher level of risk in the future, make the seawall high enough that the water doesn't come into people's driveways and roads. There's a little bit of talk about, roadway level of service policy. That's a little bit different. That's something that we're seeing more in the Keys. A lot of these things are starting to be addressed, obviously, in more low-lying communities than us, like Miami Beach, the Keys. And so we'd be looking for policies and actions that are kind of right-sized to Tarpon, clearly. The wastewater treatment facility was called out as a particularly high-risk asset because it's one of the few critical assets that's non-redundant in the city. So even the water plant, if we were to have a catastrophic failure from a storm surge or something like that at the water treatment plant, the RO plant, we do have emergency interconnects with the rest of Pinellas County, which is all served by Tampa Bay Water. And Tampa Bay Water's facilities are all further inland in Pasco County and further back into Hillsborough County and down along like the Apollo Beach area. So a storm surge that would be likely to impact our water plant would be very unlikely to cause a major storm surge that would impact Tampa Bay Water's facilities. So we would likely be able to establish emergency levels of service relatively quickly through our emergency interconnects with Pinellas County. The wastewater treatment plant, however, is a little bit different story. All the wastewater in the city goes there. We're not interconnected with Pinellas County. If it shuts down, there would be significant potential for like environmental impacts and things like that. It'd be difficult to restore service quickly. And that's what you saw with some of these folks down in after Hurricane Ian. Critical assets and restoring utility service is one of those things that helps you relocate your residents back if you have a catastrophic event. So that's one of those scenarios where we'd look at trying to harden the facilities, elevating the electrical and control systems so that if we did get impacted, the electrical systems would still be intact and we could start restoring service as quickly as possible instead of trying to have to procure new parts. Simple nuts and bolts things, those cost money, but it allows you to restore service more quickly. We've got a few other things that we talked about, updating, creating a parks master plan, oyster reef and resilient shorelines in coastal parks, trying to mitigate the risk from some of these smaller events, like we might have seen, even a few weeks ago. I think we had some nuisance flooding and things like that from that wind event with I can't remember what day it was, but I think it was a month and a half ago or so. Everyone probably recalls it. So simple things like that, having more living shorelines, oyster reefs, things like that can help reduce wave action and reduce the impacts of wind-driven flooding. There's a whole section on city facilities about trying to dry-proof areas. It talks a little bit about investing in certain projects. We did want to include specific projects here, like the Dodecanese Stormwater and Roadway Improvements Project that Project Administration's been working on for a while, and the Whitcomb Bayou Flood Mitigation Project that you had a presentation on last year. Including those projects in this report makes them fundable under Resilient Florida. So we did try and take a little bit of a maximalist approach to make sure that even if we weren't quite 100% sure about a project and it would be developed in the future, we want to make sure it was on our list as potentially funding eligible. Yeah, there's another nuts and bolts one that the city's working on currently, moving forward the construction of the new Fire Station 70. That's partially ARPA funded with the American Recovery Plan Act funds. It's an older facility, it's low lying. Building a new one will have to come up to modern code and put the finished floor elevations higher up. It'll be more resilient to storm surge. So very nuts and bolts things. Put things higher, establish policies that keep things higher, that sort of thing. So I know that was probably a lot to absorb. Are there any questions and comments? And I can go back to any particular slides if you have any questions.
Is this online, or how do we access this?
The slides?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're on the, it's on the agenda now for,
okay.
so you'll be able to go back and take a look at that
Okay.
on our agenda portal.
Okay, I don't know how to access that, but
Did you get an
'Cause I'm-
email from
no.
Tommy?
I didn't get the last one. We talked about this, but yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a connectivity thing happening
yeah,
here.
there's some connectivity thing. I got some, but now I'm not getting it.
And there's
so-
a link on that too.
Yeah, yeah, I haven't gotten the current ones, but we've been in discussion about it.
Yeah, and for anybody, if you don't need the link. If you just go to the city website and go to boards, the whole agenda portal, it links you straight out to the agenda
Okay.
portal now.
Yeah, okay, great.
Well, thank you for the great summary
Oh, I have a
of
question.
everything that's
Do
going
you
on.
have a question?
Yeah.
I have a comment, go ahead.
Could you just briefly, I know there's this whole thing about replacing the septic tanks and hooking up with the sewer system, and that's a big issue. But can you talk about how flooding impacts septic tanks?
I can speak to that in general. I do want to try to stay germane to the vulnerability assessment. So,
That part of our vulnerability?
yeah, so if your septic tank is inundated, it's not going to work properly. They tend to be gravity fed systems.
But if it floods, will the sewage in the septic tank get out, or is it sealed so that's not an issue?
I would have to look into. I mean, it's obviously a risk. That's why we tell folks if they're in storm surges and things like that, don't let your kids go play in the storm water. So,
Right.
yeah, they don't work very well, and there's heightened potential for sanitary sewage to be exposed to those storm waters.
I'm just curious, when you were talking about the wastewater treatment facility being really vulnerable, and after the last hurricane, where were they affected by Ian?
The strongest effect, the answer is yes, but not in the way that we planned here. So the good news is it's not the lowest lying area of the city. So there is some natural protection right now. It is elevated a little bit up, but we do have some assets at the wastewater plant that was built in the 80s, and they're below the 100-year flood elevation. So that's not ideal. So including some of the electrical systems. So that's one high priority project that it's very likely that we're going to be pursuing funding that project as our highest priority project for Resilient Florida dollars this year. We've already been working with PJ, in our grants specialist, on that. And the goal would be to elevate all of the electrical systems so that if we were to have a major storm surge, it would be, at least the electrical systems would be protected, and everything else like pumps and things like that can be like relatively easily swapped out from critical spares inventory. The largest impact to the wastewater facility from the Hurricane Ian was heightened flows. When you have that much, we had a large amount of surface flooding and things like that, and we have a pretty good inflow and infiltration control program where we line pipes in the sewer system and try and keep it as watertight as possible, but no sewer system is 100% watertight. The water seeps in, and so they did have a very large flow, and they managed to stay fully compliant with all the treatment requirements, which was really a testament to our employees. And normally that plant treats about 2 million gallons a day as an annual average, and it peaked up, I want to say, over 5 to 6 because of all the flooding and the infiltration of all the rainwater and storm surge coming in the sewer system. And but the plant stayed operable. We stayed fully compliant. We met all of our water quality targets, and the operators were scrambling, but they made it work.
This was with Ian or Adelia?
Sorry, this was Idalia.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I
Okay, I was
was
like,
confused
I
too.
I'm really sorry. The fact that all the
Idalia.
major hurricanes have I names for the last few years really gets me.
Agreed. Okay.
Yeah, that was Idalia. Ian, we didn't really have any significant
Yeah,
impacts.
I didn't think so, yeah.
It's fine with me.
Your hurricane projection is Cat 2, the eye of the storm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If it hits an hour north and you get the south side of the storm.
Um,
Ian decimated Fort Myers Beach because of that, because it was supposed to hit Tampa, and then my in-laws caught the eye of the storm. So they got almost 10 feet of storm surge.
Yeah, so that's one challenge is obviously you can't plan for you have to establish a design standard in engineering. If you're talking about stormwater, you have to establish a design standard. And for us, we typically use the 100-year flood elevation, which typically incorporates storm surge. In our hurricane manual, we do have different action plans for facility operations depending on the track of the storm. So if we have a more northern track for like a major hurricane that's likely to have significant flooding, we have lighter levels of staffing. We relocate more assets further inland. If it's likely to be a storm that's coming either across the peninsula where we're unlikely to have major coastal flooding, or if it's likely to be further south to where it's more likely to be a major, like a wind event, but the wind's blowing offshore, we staff the facilities and stage our equipment differently. So we try to address that through our emergency response plan.
Are there any more committee? Jory?
So it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. Like, I'm glad that we're investing in this. I'm glad that we have this action plan. I'm glad that we are thinking through, like, in the future, like, where our critical assets are and what we need to protect most. But I will say that I'm consistently frustrated that, like, this is awesome. This is fantastic to be doing this kind of, like, resilience planning. But, like, the mitigation is what is what needs to happen so that we're not driving these storms that are putting us in these spots. And to your point earlier, Carol, about the state's actions of eliminating climate is like, it's very counter. It's like it is insane. It's a colleague likened it to like having your toilet overflowing and you're like mopping up the floor, but you're not turning off the water.
Yeah.
And like that's what we're doing. So I'm super glad that we're doing this adaptation work, but like the mitigation to me is like what the state should be funding as well and be
Well,
focused in on
Yeah.
to try to
Absolutely.
I totally
dig us out of the
agree.
hole.
In the state, from what I read, you can't even use the word climate, right?
Well, that's what she was talking about
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going back to another governor,
But
but.
sorry,
we
that was
might
my
have
soapbox. I
to-
just had like to me like the adaptation stuff is important, but mitigation is
That
like
is.
equally important, and we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think everything that we can do as a city to help mitigate is really important. I'll
and
leave it at that.
individually can do
Yes.
and support.
I do want to point out, I think we're with the plan, we're going down that road. I mean, we're working on the greenhouse gas reduction target. We are going to be working on trying to do our part to reduce these impacts, but at the same time, there's also a certain level of impacts kind of already cooked in the scenario, unfortunately, from historic emissions. And there's also the very just nuts and bolts side of where in Florida, eventually a hurricane will come. So it's nice to plan for that too.
Yep.
Regardless of what happens with climate and sea level rise as well. But thank you.
Being new to the committee, I was really impressed by your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Gives me a little more confidence, living right next to the water.
Yeah. I always find myself on the map.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you.
Excellent update. Thank you so much. Okay, we're on to the items for the next meeting, and it looks like we already have a couple of things that we talked about. I'm wondering, the tree removal report. Is that, did you touch base with Shannon at all?
I
or
haven't had a chance to touch base with Shannon. I just put a few of the items here
Just
that we
ideas
had talked
that we
about
talked about,
at the
right.
last meeting. I know we sometimes get to this part of the meeting and we're like, what were we planning on talking about? So I'm trying to carry forward some items that we didn't get to in this meeting.
Well, I think from her, it would be nice to get clarification on Duke Energy's right-of-way and what that means in reality, because we had a lot of reaction right in our neighborhood to a couple of big trees that were being removed. And I had a coworker brought in newspaper that had a lot of information on the reactions in Clearwater when that was going on, so.
And Tampa Bay Times had
Okay.
a lot of that.
So that was one item. If it happens, that would be wonderful.
Shannon possibly come and speak to us?
She has several occasions, but
Yeah, I'll try my best to reach out to Shannon and see if she's got some availability to come do a presentation on that subject.
Yeah.
and Commissioner Koulianos.
Okay, that one might be a little bit interesting. I'm not sure what his schedule is. So obviously he's the commissioner, but I'll try and follow up with the city
Well, he
manager.
wants to come, so.
Well, yeah, I understand it, but I also know he's trying to address the board too, so we'll have to talk to him about what his priorities are and as far as if he wants to address the committee first, if he wants to address the board first, or, things like that. But yeah, we can coordinate with Commissioner Koulianos for sure. One other idea that we might have, it wasn't quite in time for this meeting, was a potential update on the climate action plan. For those of you who were, we had a little bit of news. It was even at the last, at the Earth Day event. We're underway on the climate action plan. We kind of were in a little bit of, the cone of silence on procurement for a bit because we had it like publicly posted and we were doing some notice to sole source and things like that. But we're going to be working with ICLEI. And we're in the data request phase, so they're looking at all of our stuff and the greenhouse gas inventory from 2019 that we already done. We'll be using that as our baseline. So I'll be discussing with the project manager from ICLEI if they'll have something substantive to bring next month, or if that's a 15-week project schedule. So that might be an option. If not the next meeting, one of the next several months, we'll have an update on that, like probably a midpoint project update.
Are we going to have a introduction by the new manager,
The sustainability coordinator?
coordinator?
Quite possibly.
Well, that needs to go
We
on
could
the
put that as
agenda.
a potential, maybe.
Staff.
Maybe.
I was planning to address that in staff comment.
Oh, sorry, we
No,
stole
it's
your
fine.
thunder, Tommy.
No, it's fine.
Stole your thunder.
Yeah, we can move on to staff comments unless there's any other ideas here for follow-up.
Well,
Joy.
maybe we can, I don't know if a month is enough time, but the ideas that we gave you for tonight, maybe get some
absolutely.
staff feedback to,
That'd be good.
Yes, that'd be
you know what I
very
mean? Like,
good.
we're running it kind of through a cycle.
Sure.
So feedback on the communication
Yes.
plan. And maybe you can tell us when the first newsletter is coming out? You said is
You'll
right-
probably be getting the newsletter before the next meeting.
Okay. Excellent.
Probably, or we're going to.
Probably.
Okay.
I'll be, so we are a little bit short-staffed. I've actually had the intern working on the newsletters, and she's doing really great work, but she's also just graduated, and so she's on a family vacation for a couple of weeks. So we've got some like last-minute edits, and it's all on her Canva account. So I'm hoping to get it knocked out as soon as she gets back, so.
That's a reality of these times. Yeah. So, Tommy, what do you have for us?
Yes, so staff comments. First, I do want to also really acknowledge all of the city staff that was working on the Earth Day event. They really put in a lot of work, and especially the recreation folks. As far as like getting it posted, they put together all of the materials other than the presentation, handling the food, and just orchestrating the event and getting it out there, and setting up the Eventbrite and things like that. So definitely want to acknowledge those folks, particularly Ashley Harder and Jamie Taylor. On coordinator, we're very close to doing a hire. We have completed the interview process. We have several really great candidates. We had I quit counting after a while, but we had well over 100 applicants between LinkedIn and Indeed. And then from there, we shortlisted. We did interviews over the last week and a half, and I think the hire will be processed most likely by the next meeting. Whether they'll be fully on board and through the background checks, that's to be determined. It always depends, and people start times and need to give notice at existing jobs and things like that. So, but yeah, we're really close. We're really excited about our pool, and you'll have some really positive news next month, I think.
Yay, great.
Excellent. Okay. Committee comments?
I have a request. Can we get these? And I think it would be really nice if we could have some of them at our meetings, so when we do have visitors, we can distribute them.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah. Robin?
Yes. Tommy, should I still ask you about recruitment? Or is that
I think
what
we've
you talked
covered it.
about? Okay. I thought so, but I just checked.
Thank you.
And I got this in the mail this week. I don't know.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Who is producing this? Does anyone know? It's
It would-
Tarpon Springs Living, which I thought might be an opportunity for communicating somehow. If this is going to be a regular thing, I'm going to do a little research on it.
I saw it on the Tarpon Community Facebook. They talked about this coming out. So are you on that?
I am, but I must have missed it.
So if you probably search there, you'll find out. I think that's what it's called, isn't it? Tarpon Community something.
It's not the city page? It's not the
No,
city
no,
web?
it's not a
Okay.
city, it's a community.
There's a community group on Facebook that a lot of people post different things about the city
It's
and stuff.
really interesting. They announce stuff, and I find out a lot about the city through that.
I'm going to have to check that link out. Thank you.
I have to go.
I know I had something else.
I have to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, Siobhan.
Bye,
See you next
Siobhan.
time.
Good to see you.
Any other committee comments? Okay.
We could adjourn.
Yes?
It's a good
I
thought.
move that we adjourn our meeting.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.